Anamorphic Cake Bake, Module 3, Chapter 2, Take 1. Welcome back, my anamorphic dearest. My name is Jittu Fahadungs, and today we're tackling Chapter 2 of Module 3 in the Anamorphic Cookbook. Today, we'll talk about the importance of crop marks and frame guides when shooting scope either as a loose reference or a hard rule for framing. In the previous video, we talked about confusing anamorphic modes and concluded that using them can have both ups and downs. On the rest of this module, we'll talk about sensor sizes and focal reducers, plus their equivalents to celluloid. On Chapter 4, we'll discuss flange distances and mount types. Chapter 5 is about previewing a desqueezed image while shooting, and we'll wrap on the glory of the as the best combo for shooting anamorphic on a budget. I'll begin this chapter by saying that I like post-production. I work in post-production. I think production is a huge thing, and the footage that comes out of camera should be amazing, but it's still just a diamond in the rough. Post-production is where you polish the diamond and make it shine. So what I'm pitching in this chapter leans towards a more intensive post-production workflow than just getting everything perfect straight out of camera. I bet I can convince you of some of its advantages. Picking up where we left off, there might be an advantage to not using your camera's anamorphic mode, which leads us to think, in some scenarios, there's no point in crying over a missing anamorphic mode. And the key for all this potential lies in crop marks, or their more popular name, frame guides. Crop marks were not a big deal when the DSLR revolution started in 2008. Canon was actually pretty stubborn when adding this feature to their cameras. Nowadays, they're more common and you can just take a quick trip down your camera menus. On the S1H, go into the menu and then on the gear menu, select monitor/display for video and then go into the video frame marker. These options are still limited, but they're much better than what they used to be. Anything is better than taping your screen, right? When shooting without desqueeze, all I care for are the 4x3 lines, although 6x5 would be great too. If your image is desqueezed, you can go straight for the 239 to 1 frame guide. I like to think of crop marks as the old-time title-safe and action-safe frames, which were originally used when framing and editing for CRT screens. Due to the nature of those displays, it was impossible to guarantee the entire frame would be shown on any given TV. There was a gray zone that could be cropped out depending on the screen. So, better safe than sorry. Everyone was instructed to not put important information in those areas. The result is the frame exists beyond action safe, or frame guides, but works fine when constrained to them. When not using an anamorphic mode, I set up 4x3 frame guides and record 16:9 all the way. The only thing that really matters is that I get clean footage in the marked 4x3 area. Anything usable beyond those marks is a bonus, and it allows me to reframe in the editing process to rebalance compositions or create camera moves that didn't exist before. In Mindhunter, David Fincher and Eric Messerschmidt shoot with the thought that the footage will be heavily manipulated in post-production. They'd rather capture more of the sensor area, although parts of it are shaded or marked to be cropped later. In my scope workflow, framing for 4x3 will give me a 266 to 1 frame, and that gives me a bit of breathing room when outputting to 2.39 to 1. We always want a little bit of wiggle room if reframes are needed. Sometimes you have to take out an element that's dirtying up the edge of the frame, and having that extra resolution to spare on the opposite side makes it way easier. When I was working in post for Age of AI, the first episode features Robert Downey Jr. explaining how we are prone to believe in myths. The whole opening revolves around the idea of Pandora's box, and we had a black podium on set with the box on top. This thing was always somewhat present in the frame as RDJ moved towards it for the conclusion that
Pandora's box. What in the box? It was a clay jar.
Whoa. Everything looked great, and the intro was shot using Atlas's anamorphics, although the delivery format was 16:9. That meant we had a lot of room on both sides. Later on, during the edit, the executive producer and director decided that the box was confusing in the frame and wanted it gone. If we didn't shoot the extra room on the sides, this would have been a heavy VFX shot, painting out that box. Fortunately, we were able to get away with reframing, using that previously discarded part of the shot. As a result, you can see just a tiny edge of it here until it properly serves the story at the end of the intro. Bottom line, always aim for the mode that gives you the most vertical resolution and better use of the sensor, even if you have to crop some of the frame later. You'll have more data, more sensor area, and more image to work with. If you're on a super tight deadline, sure, do it all in camera. But when you see my aspect ratio and cropping tutorials in Module 8, that's far, you will see that conforming to your delivery format doesn't cost much, and being faster isn't really a valid excuse. Sometimes you can save more time or save a shot by having a little wiggle room. The last important use for frame guides and crop marks is when you're shooting additional footage using spherical lenses and framing for a cinemascope delivery, or to match an anamorphic timeline. This is particularly useful for super wide shots or extreme close-ups. Lastly, if your camera doesn't really offer support for any sort of frame guides, eyeball them and use tape over the LCD screen. This trick has been around for ages. Or if you don't want to be that wild, have an external monitor. These certainly offer lots of options to help framing and don't affect the recorded areas. As an extra to all this, you can check Anamorphic on a Budget's Chapter 4a on using Cropmarks to help you mix different squeeze factors on the same project and not lose your mind. Although, I strongly discourage you to do that mix, and hopefully, you will never need it. On the next video, we'll talk about actual sensor sizes and their correlation to film. So what's your approach like? Shooting less area and saving time in post-production by doing most of the framing directly in camera? Or assigning more time to post-production and shooting with lots of breathing room in every direction for reframing later? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I look forward to an interesting conversation. If you're watching this now and you're not a member of the channel, let me clue you in on a secret. By joining our crew, you unlock at least 4 more early access videos on the cookbook and/or anamorphic subjects. Click the join button below and learn more about the perks of becoming a member. Before you go, hit that like button, and if you don't want to become a member, that's alright too. Just make sure to subscribe though, so you can get future cookbook videos. I'm Chito Fahadungs, and I'll see you on the next one.